welcome to this week's program. We're going to be talking about RTs and how they've changed over the years. We're also going to be looking at RX Plastics and the latest innovations from them. And the country comes to the city permanently. And that's an interesting story, but in just a moment, it's animal health, prevention and cure. Nick, selenium, very, very important.
Yes, very important. I guess pretty much the entire east coast of the South Island anyway, and a large proportion of the eastern areas of the North Island as well, traditionally very selenium deficient. And I guess anyone who's had much to do with rural escapades with livestock of any sort have probably heard about selenium, the metal of selenium anyway. So causes major production problems, and as with all these trace element issues, I always harp on about the analogy with the iceberg, with the hidden costs of trace element deficiency being massive before we actually get any indication of that. So I guess that's the real crux of monitoring these trace element levels through various mechanisms. I mentioned last time about monitoring copper levels with liver biopsies or liver samples through the slaughterhouses and freezing works, and that same modality can be used for selenium as well. But we can also sample with blood sampling, so we can get a sample of animals out of a mob and draw blood, and that will give us a good indication of selenium status as well.
It used to be known in the old days as bush sickness, didn't it, right at the very beginning?
That was cobalt, so we can, we'll talk about that probably in maybe next time actually. So selenium, traditionally the real problems we see with selenium almost give us an inference of problems rather than a direct relationship, and so we see things such as retained fetal membrane, so retained afterbirth in cattle that fail to get rid of their afterbirth after calving, and there's serious implications about fertility issues. So we think that selenium deficiency results in early embryonic death. So for instance, even when the pregnancy is very early, being lost, and we end up with either a barren animal, an animal that we thought was pregnant, and not carrying a calf or some reproduction products, and all of a sudden, we think they're pregnant and they're not, or perhaps they come back into season at a really obscure time after they've lost an early pregnancy. So big economic costs reproductively with selenium issues. Yeah.
A lot of old timers would suggest that they take a spoonful or teaspoonful every morning. Should we?
Potentially yes, because I guess if we're eating or consuming products that are grown in deficient areas, potentially that could be an issue. Far be it from me to advise that, because it is a toxic element. It's a metal, and so it can be toxic, and every year we do see the scenarios where we're getting toxicities. In horses particularly, we see people that over supplement, and that could also be the case with getting the amount of selenium added to drench wrong in the old days. That used to kill lots and lots of sheep, and it was a terrible error when in one decimal place was wrong in the amount of selenium that was added to drench and things like that. But the same can be said for animals that are already being supplemented, perhaps through pasture treatment, through fertiliser, and then on top of that they're given injectable products. These could result in toxicity. Horses are classic. We end up with horrible problems with feet falling off, with hooves falling off,
because of excess.
Because people think that a little is good, so a lot must be better, and that, I guess, is the old Kiwi adage, which doesn't actually go hand in hand with when it comes to trace elements.
So it's not like a trifle. The more sherry you put in, the better it is.
Well, no, not quite. Might seem better, but maybe maybe it might be the actions later on that are the problem.
Let's recap on administering, because you gave me 2 or 3 different versions there.
Yep. So supplementation can come in a number of ways. Oral supplementation is fine, and often that's accomplished in the production sense by selenium prills being added to fertiliser, as I mentioned, and that uptaken very well into the grass, into the plant, and then eaten by the animal. But in horses particularly, many people will just drench weekly or monthly. It's a cumulative element, and so you could perhaps give a month's worth of supplementation once a month, or you could split that down and give that weekly, for instance. Dairy farmers often will be akin to using dosatrons and giving soluble levels of the element through water, and that's fine as well. It does require a bit of monitoring to make sure that things are not being over or under supplemented, because it is one of these elements that can be toxic before you know it, and we have both chronic toxicities that establish over long periods of time as well as acute. So again, a very important scenario to use some good advice in conjunction with supplementation. So veterinary advice, and to be honest, it's something we would see as vets as an integral part of an animal health plan, that we would invoke monitoring systems through at various times of the year to ensure that supplementation levels are right, and give advice on how else to do that.
So it is seasonal.
Can be seasonal. I guess the effects, as I mentioned with the reproductive issues, the effects of selenium deficiency often will come about and be shown up in a seasonal fashion during the calving season, for instance, in particular, or mating season, when we're getting apparent failures of pregnancies through mating.
So I guess one of the things you need to look at very closely is if you got it in the fertiliser, and so you're going to have to keep monitoring with those blood tests, aren't you?
Absolutely. So yeah, or maybe when we're culling animals through works, or perhaps again if we're monitoring other trace elements such as copper, we can add that in to a panel when we're looking at liver biopsies and things. But yeah, absolutely. And if at a critical time we're a little bit on the low side, perhaps just before mating or a few weeks before mating, despite supplementation methods that are already in place, it may be pertinent that I, for instance, may give advice, well, just before mating or a month before mating, we'll use an injectable product to boost selenium levels during this period.
And that's for the fertility side?
Absolutely, yeah.
What are the visual signs if there's a problem?
Yeah, as I indicated, with selenium in particular, we get overt visual signs of toxicity, we get skin problems and hoof problems, and really ill animals actually with acute poisoning, and sudden deaths that were very, very traditionally very apparent in the sheep.
It's a bit of a hint something's gone.
Yeah, and very, very acutely. But when we look at deficiency, again, it's a little bit hidden, and it's mainly production limiting issues. So if we've got a large number of retained fetal membranes in a dairy herd, for instance, that may be an indication to just check that things are okay in regards to selenium. If we're having really abnormal returns to season from animals that we think look like they'd held to an insemination, and then they've sort of come back and shown signs of heat or season at an obscure time through their cyclicity, then that would maybe an indication that we've lost embryos early. Or again, if people are practicing early scanning in the dairy region, and they're getting pregnancies scanned and diagnosed very early, and then we get an animal a month or so later that seems to be bulling, or a large number of animals, that could be an indication that that pregnancy's been lost. And if there's if those numbers are actually getting to a concerning level, in regards to how your advisor is expecting things to go, then that may be a trigger to check selenium.
Brilliant, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we'll be going out to the Lincoln University.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world, or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Jim, the autumn continues to be exceedingly dry.
Yes, in this last fortnight, Rob, it's got really dry again in that first 100 millimetres or so in the soil. So all of a sudden we can't do a hell of a lot with herbicides. We can with knockdown, but I would prefer that the growers now wait till at least the first or second week of June before they apply
Another month's time.
Before they apply those sort of materials, because this just has not been cold enough. So trees, apple trees, vines, bushes are still too soft in their wood, and they'll take up those materials which we don't want them to do. So we need the frost to come along, some moisture to come along, and then we can go out and do our herbicide spraying.
I mean, we're duck shooting already.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
I was fly fishing last weekend, 21 degrees. Fantastic, actually.
Unless you happen to be a farmer.
Well, that's right, and it's getting quite serious.
No, it is actually. We shouldn't make light of it.
Talking to a number of arable growers that obviously grow black currants and other crops like that, they're going back out to keep their pasture, the new pasture underway, in their fodder crops, just to give them a bit of a perk along with irrigation. I mean, irrigating in the middle of May, it's just crazy. So it's something it is quite serious for those North Canterbury farmers and some of the Wairarapa guys. And if we do continue on, as the media are telling us now, that this could continue on for at least another month, it could become extremely serious. Dairy prices will be just one of the minor things we've got to worry about.
Exactly. However, on the other side of the coin, of course, you've got a good vind.
Yes, it is a very good vintage at the moment. The grapes are coming in very good condition. Of course, the harvesting conditions are ideal. So when you look at a harvest that's got a bit of moisture thrown in at it, you get what they call slip skin, and botrytis comes into some of the varieties. But none of that's happening this time. They're coming in sound condition. Acids are a little bit variable, but the skins are in good order, so therefore the pH and the bricks are very, very, very well balanced. So I would think out of the 2016 vintage we should have some nice wines coming through.
Well, that sounds very promising.
And there's a big, we've had areas across New Zealand that have been affected by the frost, but there's still a big crop out there.
Is there going to be enough stainless steel?
Yes, there will be. Yes, there will be enough stainless steel.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And that leads us on, I suppose, into pruning, because that's looming for the grapes, but the other people are already into it.
Well, that's right. And of course, with the conditions being as they are, it's actually ideal for pruning. The autumn leaves are taking a little bit longer to come off, but the wood is dry when they cut it, so there's no moisture, there's no chance of disease going into those little branches and cuts where they're made. So it's actually an ideal time to get stuck into your pruning, because at some stage it's going to turn around and it's going to be nasty for us for a couple of months. And of course, ground conditions change, and people don't like going out, or shouldn't go out and prune in the rain. Sometimes it gets so bad that they have to go out and prune and at least drizzle. So
why don't you prune in the rain?
Oh, because you'll get diseases in the cuts. They have to seal off and dry. Now today, if you went out there today and 20 degrees odd and made a cutting, but in 10 minutes time that's sealed off enough not to draw in any diseases that may be around in the atmosphere. So it's ideal conditions for pruning.
But obviously, if that's the case, you stop at about 4 o'clock before the dew starts.
Yeah, well, that's what they do anyway. They'll start earliest in the morning and then they'll stop. But look, at the end of the day, if there's moisture that night and the conditions and the temperatures are cool, the drying is much slower. So at the moment, it's quite rapid. And guys are getting stuck into their pruning, which is really good. But this will change.
It will change.
we get 650 millimetres of rain in the Greater Canterbury area on an annual basis. We are going to get it in lumps, like we did at mid-third week of January, where we had 180 millimetres of rain, almost a third of our rainfall. We've had very little since.
That's why we have irrigation, Jim.
Yeah, it is. But that's actually stimulated, funny enough, some of the harder to kill weeds like mallow, and especially deadly nightshade. There's a lot of nightshade out there. And that's the rain in January that's kick-started that. And of course, it's a pretty old hardy weed. We will get rid of it with the herbicides, all right, but there's a lot of it out there, a lot more than we'd normally see in any one year. And because it grows in dry conditions.
And that brings us back to what you were saying earlier about you've only got knockdown at the moment.
Yeah. So what we need to do is just put the brakes on the herbicide program, wait for another month, a good month, and then go in, and hopefully we've got some nice frost coming along. The frost actually draw the herbicide into the weeds because they're trying to survive. naturally trying to survive. They suck in every moisture they can. Unfortunately, with that moisture happens to be herbicide. So that's why the kill is much better. Do it now and you'll get a brown off, but they'll start to come back again. So earlier in the spring. So we want to delay it as much as we can, and then we won't have that come back in the spring, which will be really good.
Now, base nutrient plans.
Yeah, the baseline nutrient management plans are required by growers and farmers throughout New Zealand to buck up their ideas and get a plan for their specific activity on their farms. So what it's all about is about the nitrates leaching. How much can be leached off that farm? Now, if there's a certain type of grower, he may only have a baseline of about 20 kilograms per hectare. But if it's a higher use nitrogen using farm, they've got to reduce that, but that may not necessarily be a baseline of 20, it may be a baseline of 30. But in their whole activity, especially when you've got mixed arable farming, cropping farms, you've got activities that only have nitrogen leaching of, say, 9 kilograms, and some may be 25. So what they're trying to do now is to make sure that that's on the higher end, so 20, 22, so the farmer can continue his activities, but be much more careful and diligent in his nitrogen leakage. So these plans are now being made up. Unfortunately, they're being made up by regions and councils, so not everyone's really playing off the same page. Having said that, there are some reasons for that, and that is there are different irrigation schemes. So what comes into here is not only nutrient, but actually water. So if you've got to bring all of those topography sort of conditions into play within this plan to actually, in the end, get a balanced program for that grower going forward. What they originally said they were going to do was just let's have a look at what you've used and distributed as nitrates for the last 3 years. Well, that's totally unfair because there are so many variables across crops. If you take a black currant or a strawberry or a raspberry, they only use about 9 kilograms of nitrogen leaching, where dairy cows, 60. So how can that same farmer have his strawberries and black currants and dairy cows in balance? So they've got to go back to the drawing board a little bit and done a bit more homework. And in the end, it's going to be far, far better for our environment, irrespective of what some political parties may say. And the other thing that's part of this plan is the mapping and the development fencing, keeping stock away from waterways and all that sort of thing. There's some really good things going on out there and a hell of a lot of money being spent when the farmers don't actually get the credit for it that they should.
Because they are doing it.
They are certainly doing it. Of course they're doing it. And the ECANs of this world are making sure they're monitoring them, and that's good. So the outcome is going to be slow, Rob. I mean, Lake Ellesmere is not going to clear up in 1 year. It's going to clear up in 30 years. We've just spent 150 years buggering it. So you don't expect it to turn around and be nice and pristine in 10 years' time. But it's on the way back, and that's very, very important.
That is very important
going forward. Yeah.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, we'll be looking at the latest in communication, and you can have an RT and you're listening to what's being said on it in a different country. Craig, RTs are not just for communication, they're also a great thing as far as health and safety is concerned.
Yeah, very definitely. The old yesteryear of RT has been used on the farm back last 20, 30 years ago, etc. The radios have changed considerably. Nowadays they're actually a tool that can be used on the farm, not just for their primary reason of communication, but also the networks and those sort of things that they're operating on, etc. Give that added advantage of being able to give welfare checks for lone worker, for people who are working on their own, so that the RT system can support those checks on farm for the duty of care that's necessary from the farm managers, farm owners are concerned, right the way through to giving GPS location on the herd managers and those sort of things whilst we're actually working on the farms, providing there's a network there that can support that sort of technology.
And of course, you can actually see where the RT is in case you do need to get there.
Yeah, right down to the RT that's actually on the belt of the person that's using it, etc. So if there's an emergency event or somebody falls off a motorbike or something like that and needs assistance, they can hit the alarm on their radio and they can go into a computer and see exactly where that unit is.
I guess you can actually sort of do a reporting system, and if somebody doesn't answer when they're supposed to, you've got them on the GPS.
Yeah, they can. I mean, you're in a situation where if you've got lone worker in operation with the radios as well, which means that the radio is set with a preset timer, and as the person's busy working, the radio will give them a reminder that it's going to escalate through a process. If there's no response through that process, then an alarm will be activated to all radios on the farm. However, if it activates through the process, then he just needs to reset by doing a welfare check. It might be as simple as Craig to all personnel, A-OK, whatever the case may be, and obviously that becomes a rhythm within the communications on the farm so that everybody is virtually, not policing, but checking on everyone else's well-being.
Be vital, wouldn't it, for massive burn-offs?
Yeah, it is, but in just day-to-day operation, because depending on the size of the farm, you can have people spread from one end of the farm to the other, and if there's an accident down one end and there's not a lot of people, a lot of traffic coming through, it could be 3-4 hours before that person's actually located if there is an issue.
Is it right that they can actually now also tie into other networks?
Well, they can do with the move to digital and those sort of things, and the access now into the IP, which basically is internet. You can communicate over a cellular device through to a farm that could be hundreds of kilometres between, or even outside the country if you wish to.
Now, a cellular device meaning a cell phone?
That's correct. Yeah, you can use a cell phone using an app on a cellular phone to actually communicate back to the RT back onto farm. So the boss could be sitting sipping pina coladas in Fiji if he's lucky enough.
If he's lucky enough.
And still hear the traffic on the farm if need be, if he just wants to check in and see how things are going.
That's huge technology.
Yes, very definitely. But to a lesser degree, we've got people that are working on farms in the Ashburton area, and we've got managers that are living in Christchurch, and those managers from their homes can be hearing the communications on the farm and can choose to communicate from RT to RT, not even using the cellular.
Craig, we've come a long, long way from the old-fashioned walkie-talkie.
A very, very long way, and this is where people need to sort of get their heads around that RTs, which used to be a yesteryear product and seem to be that, they've moved on from that, they've moved into the cellular space, but the coverage is not always there. The RT now is in a situation where it is able to be used, providing the networks are there, which they are in Canterbury, to be able to communicate from Christchurch all the way down to Temuka if you want it to.
Now, changing the subject slightly, you've got a wee device which can let you know where something is if it gets stolen.
Oh, very definitely, and people have been screaming for this sort of product, and we never had it available for quite a period of time. But as in our last program when we had a bit of a chat with you, the little spot tracker, this is the size of the unit here, very, very small. That device can go onto a vehicle as small as a trailer, because it has its own internal batteries. It can go onto a trailer, it could go onto a quad bike, anything that is of value that is being stolen. We know that there's a lot of equipment that's being stolen off farms, and this is a really, really good little piece of equipment that allows you, even from your cellular device, to be advised when a movement alarm has happened on this unit. So if it's in the middle of the night, all of a sudden your unit chirps up to say there's a movement on the tractor, which you thought was in the back paddock hanging onto the irrigator, is now being stolen. It will give the location of that device any stopped events, and it can be tracked to its where it's been taken to.
So I guess the police would be applauding you guys.
Oh, very definitely. It makes it a lot easier on everyone. You get to retrieve the equipment that's been stolen, plus also those people that have stolen it are then in a situation, obviously, they will be assisting the police with their inquiries.
Tony, it's dry and it's spring.
It's I can't think of the right words to describe. I'm sitting here in May and talking to you about the fact that we actually do need to irrigate, and that it probably doesn't look like there's any relief in sight for the next 10 or 12 days. And this is very unusual.
You're getting blood burst and things again, or bud?
Oh, we're getting all sorts of things going on. I mean, we're for example, most of the irrigation that's taking place is on pastures, and we're still growing between 40 and 50 kilograms a day. So that's like that's akin to what we might be growing in late September, for example, coming into the spring and parts of early October. So very unusual conditions. If you're growing that amount of dry matter on in pastoral situations, then you're going to continue to get a response by irrigating, and we know we will, because we've got soil temperatures that are somewhere cranking around somewhere between about 11 or 12 degrees starting in the morning, which is above our 10-degree threshold, and we're getting up to about 14 degrees during the day. So we've got, pretty ideal conditions for growing ryegrass in particular, and fescues. So they're going to grow and produce that 40 or 50 kilograms a day. So
if there's water on it.
If there's water. I mean, we've reached the point where we have to advise people to actually irrigate. I mean, we have been hanging off, and of course they've been hanging off. I mean, it's May and they're going, oh, well, why would we be irrigating? But when you look ahead at the weather, you look at where we're at, if you can put on 10 or 12 millimetres, you're going to get through the next 10 days. Mm-hmm. And you'll get an immediate response to growth from that.
That's right. But what's going to happen, because we are getting buds forming? And
I mean, plants, particularly those plants that are looking for, they should have gone dormant by now, or heading into dormancy. We would normally have had 1 or 2 really decent frosts by now. Usually by now we will have had a few 4 or 5 degree frosts, which pushes things into dormancy. I mean, they've decided, just because of the temperatures, not so much the day length, but they've decided because of temperatures that it is literally springtime, and that they're going to start growing again. And so what looked like buds a month ago have now truly formed into real buds, and are looking at bud break again in those sorts of plants. Yep.
Let's talk Ruataniwha. Are you surprised that it's still rushing on?
Oh, not at all surprised. I've done quite a lot of work in the Ruataniwha area, and sure, they had to go back to their farmer purchases, and they had to make some changes in the cost structure. But this is an opportunity that 3 droughts in 4 years, or 3 extended dry spells in 4 years, it has a pretty serious driving force towards purchasing water and being able to put that resilience back into those operations. And all along, while there are some very big players in there that will take a relatively large chunk of water, there have always been the farmers in there that particularly have breeding units or have got bulls on board, and they're either having to sell in January or February when they haven't got animals to prime levels. Mm-hmm. So they're selling at deflated prices. So you struggle to make money when you're doing those sorts of things. And for those that have got breeding units, they're unable to finish their lambs, and they're unable to finish their yearlings. So they're always selling into the store market, not getting any prime prices out of those animals. And so there's been a very large uptake from those groups of farmers. So, they got their 45 million cubic metres they needed to press the green button. They've got 191 farmers, I think it's 191 farmers on board, signed up for that 45 million. And there will be a number of people that jump onto the ship now. It's like, they're the fair weather supporters, so to speak. Mm-hmm. They're sitting there waiting to see if it was going ahead, and the fact that it is going ahead now, they'll jump on board.
Will it get cheaper for them the more people come on?
No. The construction cost is the construction cost, and it's been budgeted on the basis that they sell all of the water that's available from storage, and so that's what the price has been worked out on. I mean, the scheme, it would be probably unviable for us for just over half of the water, I think it is, that's available for storage to be priced to cover the whole cost of the scheme. It's a $300 and something million scheme now. So
we hear lots of stories about the price just escalating, and every time they look at it, it's another couple of million.
The big issue with all of these things, and if you look at all of the schemes, all the modern schemes in particular that have been built, that weren't built back in the 30s and 40s and up until the mid 80s with subsidies, is that if you look at these schemes that are being built, the gestation period for them is so long. I mean, if you look at Ruataniwha, I think Ruataniwha is something like about 7 years down the track since it was initiated and the consenting process started. And your estimates to build 7 years ago are no longer the estimates to build now, no matter what the contingencies are that you put in there. And the same thing happens with CPW, the Central Plains Water Scheme in Canterbury. I mean, the cost of that has escalated. It was 10 years in the consenting process. So very hard to get an exact price looking out 10 or 15 years.
Because you can't really work out what the costs are going to do.
No,
in 10 years.
No. You know, land prices, for example, have gone up. So there are easements to be, just if you look at that, there are easements that need to be purchased and paid for to allow canals to come through farms or along roads or wherever they're coming. And so that land becomes more expensive because you don't go out and buy all of that initially. You might take out
exactly. Because you don't know if it's going to go ahead or not.
Yeah, until such stage you get a sign up, you don't know that all of that water is going to come down that road or go across that farm or whatever it happens to be. So it's very hard to estimate that. People would say, well, you know, the engineer should do a better job of estimating the price. Well, we don't know how much steel's going to be in 15 years' time, and we don't know what concrete's going to cost us in 15 years' time. We don't know what pipe is going to cost us in 15 years' time. You can take a stab at what the inflation adjustment might be, but it is a stab. Yeah, and look, you know, the Ruataniwha water did not double in price after they went back to their farmer buyers. It went up a fraction. Sure, it went up from 25 cents or 23 cents a cubic metre, but it hasn't gone to 50 cents a cubic metre. It hasn't gone to 40 cents a cubic metre.
And it's still viable.
Still viable, yeah. Those farmers that have done their homework, you've got to remember most of these people don't have any water. So if you're putting water on, you're going to double your yield. So, you know, instead of not finishing lambs off a 50,000 breeding unit, you suddenly can finish lambs off a 50,000 breeding unit. There's money to be made.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment, there's another aspect of irrigation to be looked at. Phil, filtration, what have we got and how do we use it?
What we have, Rob, is we have a range from 20 millimetre through to 50 millimetre, or 3/4 through to 2 inch. And essentially their purpose, when you think about it, is to remove particulate matter. And depending on what you've actually got in your water, they can be very, very effective at doing that.
We're looking at things like silt?
Absolutely. Where, for instance, you're coming out of a waterway, maybe a canal or a water race, and you're wanting to run that water into micro sprinklers or drip line or something like that, then you need to provide some degree of protection to that system.
So there's more than one type?
Yeah, it's more than one type. We have, first of all, simple screen filters, which are as obvious as you see. Effectively, the water comes onto the inside of the screen and it blows through the screen, and effectively any material that's small gets captured onto that screen surface. And then it's just a matter of flushing that, or in fact taking the element out and giving it a wash and putting it back in.
And what about the other one, the blue one?
This is a system of rings. It's a ring filter. So essentially what you have here is a whole series of grooves on the surface of this piece of polypropylene. And effectively when you take another ring in the stack, they produce essentially a labyrinth for the water to pass through. So they're actually going from the outside to the inside and then flowing to downstream.
So it's the opposite to the first one?
It's the opposite direction to the first one. And when you look at the body, you can actually see on here that this is the direction of flow for disc, and this is the direction of flow for screen. So it's actually passing in a different direction through the filter. And then we have them in two sizes. So this one is 100 micron or 0.1 of a millimetre. So we're talking very fine particles. Obviously everything bigger than that will also be captured. And this one here is 120 micron, so even finer. So much smaller particles are captured by this one. And effectively it's about making sure that all of those systems continue to function out in the field.
How often do you need to clean them? I suppose that depends on the water supply.
It really depends on the water quality that you actually have in the water supply. So where it's bore water, for instance, on the Canterbury Plains here, the quality is reasonably good with big particles of sand perhaps. In that situation, actually it won't block very quickly. In situations where it's pulling it over a water race or a pond, it's going to fill up much faster.
So where in the line between the water supply and the nozzle would you put one of these?
It fits on the pressure side of the pumping system or whatever you've got to add energy to the system. And effectively these can take up to 10 bar pressure. So that's roughly 140 psi, something like that. So they're very, very heavy glass reinforced nylon bodies. Very, very tough.
And dead easy to get in there to blow it out though?
Absolutely, yeah. It's just a matter of undoing the captured nut here and actually removing the body. So it is a little bit about preparation because you need to isolate this to be able to do it. So valves on each side very likely. And then you've got pressure ports at the top here where you can actually determine whether in fact you've got a pressure loss across the unit.
So it basically lets you know when you really should be cleaning it.
Yeah, when it's clean, obviously the loss of pressure across the device for a given flow will be quite low. And as it becomes more and more blocked, that pressure difference will increase. So that then says, oh, time to clean it.
It's a pretty complicated thing, this irrigation, isn't it? In just a moment though, we're going to be looking at the city taking on the farm in the middle of itself. So an ex-building site that looks exceedingly scruffy, but you're going to turn it into a haven.
Yeah, this is going to be Christchurch City's first edible park, which means we're going to be creating a beautiful park site here where almost all of the landscaping will be producing food to share with our community. And as well as the landscaping, there'll also be a geodesic dome about right where we're standing here, which will allow us to grow all year round and maybe something exotic like a banana, but also provide workshop and educational space. And then over this way, there'll be a cafe run by 5 local community groups to help fund the work that they're doing. And within that building, a local food information centre. So if someone's wanting to find out where their nearest community garden is, or how do I grow tomatoes, or where can I buy local and support this whole movement, this is the first place they can come.
Who's behind it?
So it's the Food Resilience Network. We're a network of about 50 organisations from the City Council and DHB to chefs, farmers, guerrilla gardeners, all working since the earthquakes to create food resilience in the city, which means that all of our people have access to the nourishing food that they need. And also that the people growing and producing that food, empowering that whole thing, have the support to thrive.
There's obviously a lot of construction work going on around you. How long do you think it's going to take you?
We are hoping that we'll be having earthworks here starting August and then the garden open in September. We need to get the orchard trees and everything in the ground by the end of September at the very latest, otherwise it's going to be too dry and they're going to struggle. The buildings might come a bit after that. And during that time, this whole area, instead of a road behind us, it's going to be a beautiful pedestrian cycleway boulevard. And so this is going to be a really gorgeous area of town, even though it's a bit not very inviting at the moment.
Now the reserve next door is to commemorate those who died in the earthquake in the PGC building.
That's right, so it's going to be retained. There's going to be a big lawn area and some other benches and seating, quite a plain sight, but what it means is that our cafe could potentially spill out and that could be our front lawn, so just to increase the leisure space we have available. And we've also got a car park to the north, so both of those mean that we're not going to get shaded out by buildings.
Now funding, you're talking a lot of money on a very, very valuable land.
Yes, so this is a $3 million site. It's some of the best real estate in the city. We've been granted it by the government for $1 a year. And so we really want to create something here that's not just your Joe average kind of higgledy-piggledy community garden, but something that is a shop front to the whole local food movement and builds credibility and engagement to the whole deal.
Now, obviously, there are other gardens or other areas that people are doing, though.
Yes, there's nearly 30 community gardens within the city, and more if you include schools. A lot of them are struggling to get volunteers and all the people that they need, so that's why if people come here, we're going to have displays to engage people and help all of those community gardens recruit the volunteers and community that they need for them to thrive.
You'll be teaching youngsters all about food and the fact that it doesn't necessarily just come from a supermarket.
Exactly, and that's part of the reason of having a cafe on site as well, is children and other people will be able to see food coming out of the ground and then see it turned into a meal. There's a lot of kids that I seem to know don't even understand the relationship between ingredients, so a carrot, and then what a carrot ends up being in a meal.
It's obviously going to be very accessible. Are you concerned about vandalism?
We've actually found there's a couple of urban farms within a couple of minutes walk from here, and they've had very little trouble, and what makes the difference is them being authentically connected to the community that's here. So all the community's looking out for it, and it's a respected asset. Obviously it'll be lit at night as well, so it's a safe place, but we don't want to have cameras or anything like that. But there will be security patrols that also probably come across from Margaret Mahi just to make sure nothing's going on. But part of our lease agreement with the government is there can't be any fences on this site. It's all going to be open just like any other park would be.
Now, you've got your $1 a year rental, but what about other funding?
Yeah, so we've got $1 a year rental. We've got that expense covered, but it's going to cost within the realm of $1.5 to $2 million to construct everything on the site and keep it running. So we're seeking grant funding. We've got a crowdfunding page, and the great thing about that is for the next week until midnight this Sunday, the Canterbury Horticultural Society is matching every donation we get through there up to $10,000. And I'm also out there every week talking to companies who, for example, construction or engineering or landscape architects, and inviting them to get on board with this project and give us their expertise or their supplies or their services for free. And I think that that's actually going to be the fastest way we get this built, because a lot of the grant funding for building works, we wouldn't find out until the end of this year whether we've got the money or not, and we don't want the people of Christchurch to have to wait that long.
After the break, we'll be looking at the latest in tractors as far as Massey Ferguson is concerned.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
JJ's have got a big range of tractors.
Yes, we do. Massey Ferguson, Fendt, Izeki, Challenger. We also do Manitou telehandlers and Lely hay equipment.
There's a lot of things for somebody to learn.
Oh, we cover the field, yeah.
Do tell me about them, because they've come a long way since the Massey Ferguson, Massey Ferguson's 35 in fact, that I learned to drive on.
Yeah, the Massey Ferguson we've got behind us is a 6612. They come out from the factory loader ready. All the controls for your transmission are on the handle for your loader, so you can go forward, reverse, all through your gears. They have come a long way.
And the little ones?
Yeah, the wee Izeki here, that's actually going up to Erewhon Station. Gets quite cold up there and they wanted a cab and something very simple to use, and that's the best they could find on the market.
The range, I guess, that you sit down with a client and work out their needs and then sort out a tractor that's going to fulfil them.
Yeah, we cover from everything from 30 horsepower to 400, or we can go bigger if you get into the Challenger, but no, we seem to have a tractor for most needs.
And of course, Massey Ferguson's been around for years.
Yes, we've been, JJ's have been with Massey for 56 years, and we're the longest serving Massey dealer in New Zealand.
But it's sort of like sitting in a car, really.
Yeah, I had you in one before. It is, it's as easy as driving a car.
So all your hydraulics, they're all very, very simple, so any fool can drive one of these things.
Yeah, dead right. I can drive one, so yes, everyone else can.
I reckon I'm in with a chance as well, actually, Pete.
Yeah, no, they're very simple to use and very easy to drive. Very fuel efficient, that's one thing. They've got the Sisu or Agco power engine in them now, which comes from the Vulture range, the Masseys, and incredibly good engine.
And I guess you've got computers to let you know anything like wheel slip.
Yeah, it tells you on the dash what your wheel slip is, your fuel economy. You can even get headland management, so it tells you how much of the paddock you've done and how many litres per hectare, etc.
Now you've got your basic models, and then you can also get very, very sophisticated if somebody wants that sort of thing.
Well, you can. Like, the sky's the limit. We can have auto steer, self steer, precision down to 2 centimetres, hands off the steering wheel.
And Ray, you've got a fleet of JJ front end loaders.
We've had these telehandlers now, Rob, for quite some time. It's a very important part of our business is to have telehandlers like these ones. We actually use them a lot in the field. We're actually quite a large and busy irrigation company here in Ashburton. We've got various spanning guys who assemble irrigators in the field, and we need these types of systems we've got here to make the guys' job a lot more easier in the field, moving stuff around in the paddocks. It's fine in a day like this when the sun is shining and it's nice and dry, but in the wintertime, of course, it can get quite wet, quite boggy and things like that also. We've got to bear that in mind. These being four-wheel drive, pivot steer and things like that makes our job a lot easier, for sure.
I guess time is money as far as you're concerned, as well as your client, of course.
Very much so, Rob, yes. We've had a number of these types of systems in the past. We decided to go down the Manitou track about 2 or 3 years ago now. We've now got 3 of these in the fleet. We're very happy with the service that JJ's and Ashburton have provided. The quality of the product itself is very, very good. We've looked at other brands, but we believe that these are still the best by a long shot at this point in time.
And the crew likes them?
Very much so. They've got all the mod cons. They've even got heated seats, dare I say it, Rob. Not that that's completely necessary, of course, but for some reason the guys like heated seats, air conditioning, radios and everything like that. But everything is at the fingertips, from the controls, and this is the important thing. They're safe, they're reliable to use, which makes life a lot easier for everyone.
Does it take very long to learn how to operate one?
No, certainly not. They're user-friendly, very much user-friendly. We've got a number of guys, but we've got key people who drive the machines because that's their job to look after all of the other gear on site and so on, and the staff. And with health and safety, you've got to be very conscious of how we do things in the field.
Gavin, it doesn't have a cab, but you love it anyway.
Yeah, it's a tractor that's basically easy to get on and off. We find that its visibility is great from it. So a lot of what we do, we don't need the cab because we're shifting irrigators. So as a result, we don't need a flash cab to sit in. So it's pretty much what we wanted for the job.
You've still got all the bells and whistles on it.
Oh yeah. This for us is a bit of a new transmission. It's very easy to operate. The beauty of it is you've got a shuttle control it. You don't have to worry about clutching. And when you're unloading hay bales or moving tractors, moving irrigators, it's very, very easy to just shuttle back and forth.
Now I understand that you were pretty impressed with the size of the front wheels.
Yeah. A big part of why we bought the tractor in the first place was because of its ride. We've had tractors over the years of various makes and models, but the wheels basically dictate what sort of ride you get across the paddock. And on this property, it's nice and flat. There's no wheel ruts or anything like that from pivots. So, it's like driving a car.
To the point that your father uses it, and he's no spring chicken.
No, he's 82. And one of the reasons we looked at this tractor was the fact that it was very, very easy to get on and off. The bottom step was very easy to step onto, and handhelds were in the right place, and it's just a natural progression to just slide into the seat.
And as far as the power is concerned and all the attachments, you're pretty happy with that?
Oh yeah, you've got to have power to do the job. The four-wheel drive makes a big difference. This property here, we can pull a 10-tonne roller with that piece of equipment. We can do everything we like with it. We've got larger tractors. We've got a larger 100 horsepower Massey as well with a cab. It's like riding in a car. It's actually in some respects too flash inside. You're just too scared to get it dirty. It's new equipment, it's new technology, and it's right up there.
Gavin, you've seen a lot of changes in your time as a farmer.
Oh yeah. Go from the old Armstrong steering to the live drive PTOs. This thing's just push button. It's a piece of cake to drive.
And so from a fairly small unit to a fairly large one, what are you actually doing here?
Cropping, it's a cropping farm, and in the winter we graze dairy cattle, and really it's about as simple as it gets here.
How big's the area?
This block here is 210 hectares, and everything grows a crop of something from carrots to clover, wheat, barley, grass seed.
So you really got a tractor for every purpose?
The middle one does all the drilling and fertiliser spreading. The bigger one does the ploughing and the cultivating, and the lighter tractor does carts the straw and feeds out in the winter, and does some cultivating as well because it's big enough to do that.
Indeed it is then, a tractor for every purpose.
Yep, so the whole three are exactly the same to drive, no difference. An 81-year-old drives the whole three of them, and he'll spend 8 hours in each one if he has to. I don't ask him to, he just comes and does it. So that's how easy it is for a fellow who mainly worked on a sheep station down south, which his name's Ian Southern. He'll come out. He even drove one yesterday for half a day.
So I guess it's the usual story. You buy the tractors and your staff and mates drive them because they enjoy doing it and you don't get a look in.
Yeah, I get the sack, yeah. We all do a bit.
I guess with a unit this big there's a fair bit of tractor work to be done because no doubt you're cropping and so you're turning the paddocks over.
Yep, twice a year, yeah.
So Te Wakanui and very broad acre. Tell me a bit about the property and what you're doing here.
We're Wakanui and Pendarvist, so we're farming 1,000 hectares between the two locations.
I know there's not many fences, just cropping.
All cropping here. We have got some fences out at Pendarvist, but limited. We don't have that many.
And it's 4 generations.
Yep. Stuart's my pop, Greg, my father, myself and Max.
Who's obviously a Fent man.
He's a Fent man, yep. Hasn't had a choice so far.
And I guess you're growing just about everything?
Growing everything, cropping, but also mainly horticulture, vegetables, potatoes, onions, carrots, beetroot, and then all the wheat, barley, cereals and small seeds.
And you're very happy to stick with Fent?
Yep. No, I'm not sure. We brought our first Fent in 2000, I think, and from then we've had a few buy and sell, but we've got 11 in operation at the moment.
So what do you like about them?
The Vero gearbox, that was the first sell, and then from there there's another few like the reverse steer we're using. Both these tractors have got reverse steer.
What does that mean?
When we're harvesting our potatoes and onions, with the GPS we turn the seat and the steering wheel round so we don't have to bend our neck all day. We just look at the operation, or look at the harvester, and it's a lot more comfortable for the operator.
And so the GPS actually drives it while you're watching the harvester?
Yeah, so the GPS keeps it going in a straight line and you're watching the harvester, so you're not watching where you're going except for a mirror in the cab.
That would be quite weird, wouldn't it?
It takes a bit to get used to, but after you're used to it, it's fine. It's quite good. Sooner have it than out it, yeah.
Well, there was those who would suggest that it's the Rolls Royce of tractors.
Yeah, I think so. Like, you get what you pay for, and I think they're fairly well spec'd, and like this tractor here's got 8,000 hours on it. We've got another two with over 10,000 hours on, and touch wood, we haven't had any major problems with them.
So you've obviously got a fair bit of faith in them.
No, we've got a lot of faith in them. There are other brands out there that I don't think are going to last as long. So the Vario transmissions tested, like we've got two machines that have got 12,000 hours on them, and we're happy with it, so keep buying them.
What about the grunt? Obviously they've got a fair bit of it.
Yep, they're good. They get the power to the ground. Most of it is all tillage work, so the fuel efficiency's pretty good on them, and that's why we keep going with them.
And if you want to see more about the tractors and the different things that JJs are doing, you can find it on our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.